Hello and welcome to the Lechuga channel, where I like talking about storytelling among other things. If you know me, you know I love stories and fiction of all kind, and I have to admit 2022 was a great year for storytelling. I mean, we had all kinds of stories this year. There was a lot of superhero stories. We got Doctor Strange, which was okay. We got Thor 4, which was kind of shit. We got Black Panther. I never saw Black Panther. I did see the Batman though. That one was awesome. You know, it's all like moody and dark and gothic. Gotham looks like such a piece of shit in this movie. Batman is so like tough and edgy, and I just loved what's his name? Robert Pattinson. I think he did a great Batman, and I just loved the movie as a whole. But I think my favorite superhero story was The Boys. That one was really cool. Season 3 came out this year, and it's by far the best one yet. It's like in this world where superheroes are all corrupted and weird. You have this character Homelander, who's this complete dipshit. He's also the funniest character in the show. There's a lot of great moments, there's a lot of great characters. That's definitely one you should check out. There are a lot of great fiction books as well. There's Book Lovers, which I liked. There's It Starts With Us, which was okay. There was The Final Gambit, which was also okay. Yeah, I didn't read that many books that came out this year now that I think about it. Let's see what else. In the world of anime, we had the much anticipated release of the Chainsaw Man anime. And as you can see, I am a fan. But enough of all of the recaps, it's time to get into the real meat and potatoes of this video. Out of all of the stories and fiction I experienced across the year, I have picked a total of 3 for my favorites. These are stories and pieces of fiction that released this year from across all mediums that I loved, and definitely left an impact on me as both a reader and a writer. Here are some honorable mentions before that. I previously mentioned The Boys, which was pretty fun. I'm a big fan of Elden Ring, which has this really cool lore, but the story is basically non-existent. And I also want to give one final honorable mention to a book called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I'll probably make a full video on this book alone, but this is one of the greatest things I've read in a long time, and it would be on this list if I actually finished it in time. So now here we are, the Lechuga channel's best of storytelling in 2022. As I mentioned, there's a lot of cool books that came out this year. And as you could probably guess, a book did make the list, but it's not a fictional book, but instead a non-fictional memoir that really made waves this year. I'm Glad My Mom Died is the memoir of one Jennette McCurdy, who you might recognize as the girl who played Sam in iCarly. Now, I want to make it clear that I haven't seen a single episode of iCarly in my life. I don't know why, I just never bothered to do so, which is kind of weird since it is something that's very from my generation. Anyway, well, this might not be a fictional book, it is told in a storytelling-like way, so I'm counting it as one. In its core, I'm Glad My Mom Died is not only the story of Jennette McCurdy's relationship with her abusive, narcissistic, overbearing, and not very nice mother, but it's also her life experience from her when she was 5 years old all the way up until modern day, including not only her experience with her mother, but also her experience with many people like co-star Miranda Cosgrove and show producer Dan Schneider. Now, right off the bat, Jennette McCurdy has a very distinct narrative voice. When she's describing the things that are happening in her past, she makes sure to always focus on the most significant part of her life when she's describing what's happened in her past. Her relationship with her mother is pretty much what is the crux of the book, even after she's died, as the title implies. She doesn't really have to tell you anything, but instead just describes and narrates a variety of situations with her mother that very much show her for who she is. She's irrational. She only thinks about herself. She's a compulsive liar. And these are all things that are slowly revealed to you throughout the course of the book. But even so, you can still tell how Jennette McCurdy herself was emotionally manipulated by her mother. You can really feel the raw emotion in this book, from scenes where her mother is forcing her to act even though Jennette McCurdy never wanted to, or even how after she made money and fame with iCarly, her mother kept forcing her to give her money for things because she was completely broke. And yet through all of that, Jennette McCurdy still loves her mother because she's been the only person who has been there for her, because her mother has made sure that she is the only person in her life. This is a relationship unlike anything else I've seen in a book before, and seeing it develop across the first half of the book alongside all of the other things that happened with Jennette McCurdy in the set of iCarly and beyond that was genuinely emotionally heartbreaking to me. throughout the whole thing, I just wanted to see her get better and go beyond her mother and find other things in life. But no, her dipshit mother just keeps abusing her emotionally. This leads to the second half of the book, which takes place after she dies and the repercussions because of that. This is when you really see the effects of her mother on Jennette McCurdy, as she slowly starts to realize what her mother had been doing to her throughout all of those years. At first, everything is worse than it ever was before, but slowly you see her try to get better and move on from it. She goes through a lot of shit, but it's that shit that makes her a better person. As you can tell so far, the book is very heartbreaking and tragic, but as the title implies, it's also really funny. This book has a bit of a sense of humor, but you gotta have a bit of a fucked up sense of humor to find some of this stuff funny, which is clear that Jennette McCurdy does. And it's a type of humor that shockingly lands each time. There are moments in this book where I was laughing out loud from how ridiculous and fucked up some of these situations were, but it never feels like it's crossing the line or going too far. It always feels just right for the story, and it helps lighten up the mood a lot. My one small gripe with the book is that near the end, it does start to feel a little bit like misery porn. Like, it gets so exaggeratedly depressing that it started to depress me at the same time. And I get that this is her life and how things were, but I really feel like the dark humor could have been a little more prevalent throughout this section. Overall though, I'm glad My Mom Died is by far and wide the best book I've read this year. Even if you don't know anything about Jennette McCurdy or iCarly, this is an absolute must read, especially in terms of one's relationship with their mother, but also with how stars are treated in Hollywood, especially child stars, which Jennette McCurdy was. So yeah, definitely check this one out. It is absolutely fantastic. Now for my second pick, there's one thing you should know about me. I'm not that big a fan of TV dramas. I've seen like maybe a dozen hour-long episode TV shows in my life. It's only really the ones I really like that I watch. So when I tell you that Breaking Bad is a fantastic TV show, it's because it's a damn good show. I watched this one like a few years back, and every episode just had me on the edge of my seat. The characters were so compelling. The plot points were just holy shit. All of this leads to a climactic and definitive final season that brings everything to one of the most satisfying conclusions I've seen in a story. And after watching that, I saw the first episode of Better Call Saul and I said, I'm good. But that was a mistake, because I went back this year after season 6 finally came out, and I can say with confidence that Better Call Saul is one of the greatest pieces of television, maybe one of the greatest pieces of fiction I've seen in my life. If you're familiar with Breaking Bad at all, then you know what Better Call Saul is. He's Saul Goodman. He's the dipshit lawyer who helps Walter White. Except in this show, he's not Saul Goodman at all. He's James McGill, who's just your run-of-the-mill lawyer who is kind of down on his luck as of late. And that's in essence what Better Call Saul is about for its 6-season run. It's the life of James McGill with all of its ups and downs and how he slowly turns into the iconic Saul Goodman. But there's so much more going on in this show, because in its core, Better Call Saul is a story about a series of characters and their eternal quest for happiness. Unlike Breaking Bad, which is a show filled with awful, terrible people, Better Call Saul has characters which are somewhat redeemable. They're still major jackasses, but they're not as blatantly awful as they are in Breaking Bad. And this to me makes for some of the most compelling characters I've seen on television. James McGill / Saul Goodman / Gene Takovic. Yeah, on one half he's a charlatan who's constantly helping criminals and getting away with doing some awful shit, but he also genuinely cares about people, like his brother Chuck McGill and his love interest Kim Wexler. Sure, he does some awful things in order to help them, but unlike in Breaking Bad, you can kinda see where he's coming from. He does awful things, but he does them because he has no other choice, or at least to him it looks like he has no other choice. He doesn't want to be this way, he's forced into it, or at least at first anyway, because what Saul Goodman / James McGill really wants in life is to be happy, but life doesn't want him to be happy. From his jealous brother Chuck McGill preventing him from wanting to be a lawyer, to his boss figure Howard Hamlin who's constantly pushing him down and not letting him achieve his goals, to the setbacks both him and Kim experience, seeing him move through life and seeing him try and find better things, better people, better ways to achieve what he wants. This is some of the most compelling stuff I've seen in any piece of fiction. But all of this leads me to the final season, which is by far and wide the best one yet. A lot of this final season focuses on Saul Goodman and Kim Wexler's final attempts to try and find some sort of satisfaction in life, which is where you really see their morality go downhill. They do some pretty awful shit in this season, but it's also really funny. This is a season that's all kinds of emotional, all kinds of tragic, all kinds of character driven. There are some really powerful moments in season 6 of Better Call Saul. All of these moments being derived from characters and their relationships with each other, which leads to a very ambiguous yet satisfying ending that perfectly wraps up the story of Saul Goodman and Kim Wexler in a way that feels weirdly fitting for Better Call Saul. In its core, this is a show about characters, their relationships with each other, and their eternal quest for happiness. You could go as far as saying this is a show about life in general. In life, things go slow, things go unexpected, and when they do, life just kind of keeps going on. You think one thing will make you happy, but then when you get to that point, you realize it doesn't. This is a truly groundbreaking show in terms of both character writing and fiction that I think everybody should watch at least once. If you haven't seen Better Call Saul, now is the time to do it with the show finally being over this year, even if you haven't watched Breaking Bad. I have a weird and complicated relationship with the God of War video game franchise. The original 3 games were about this guy, Kratos. He's a complete jackass. He's a Spartan from Greece and goes around killing people, so much so that he one day accidentally kills his wife and daughter. Oops. In fact, he's such a jackass and mass murderer that he goes around and kills all of the gods of Olympus. Because he can do that, apparently. I remember I initially played these games when I was 14. I didn't really like them, all things considered. More than anything, I just thought Kratos was not a likable character at all, especially as a protagonist. Like, why would I want to play as a guy who goes around killing people and murdering gods? That just didn't make sense to me. But then, I played the new one that came out in 2018. This is a game that's no longer about some guy going around killing people, but instead, it was about an old, broken man, Kratos, dealing with the consequences of his actions. He killed all the gods of Olympus out of revenge, yes, but the act of revenge didn't bring him any solace or peace, but more pain. And it's that pain that haunts him still, especially now that he's actually vulnerable as he has a son. Pretty much the entirety of that 2018 game was Kratos looking at his son and realizing that he's going the same path that he did. So Kratos tries everything possible to make sure that his son doesn't end up like him. He wants him to be better. God of War Ragnarok continues this story in what is somehow not only a superior story to the first game, but is genuinely a wow. When I first finished this game a few weeks ago, I was so emotionally impacted by everything about it. I can confidently say that God of War Ragnarok is some peak fiction shit. This game takes place a few years after the events of the last one. Ragnarok, the Norse mythology thing, which means the end of the universe, is approaching sometime in the future. And the Allfather of Norse mythology, Odin, doesn't really want that to happen. So he tries to confront Kratos to try and have him join his side so that Ragnarok doesn't happen. Kratos tells him to fuck off, and then conflict starts. Granted, the story of God of War Ragnarok is a bit more complicated than it is in the first game, but more importantly, this is still a game about characters and their relationships with each other. More specifically, it's about what it means to be a father and what it means to be a son. Like I mentioned, Kratos is a broken, tired old man. He went through a ton of pain and suffering in the events of the original games. Pain and suffering that haunts him literally every day of his life, to the point where he basically shows no emotion and stays with the same serious face throughout the whole game. But even still, he wants to be there for his son, but oftentimes he feels like he's not good enough, like he's still too angry, still too rash. His son Atreus is now a teenager, and of course he's in the rebellious phase, and he goes on to do all kinds of stupid shit, and Kratos just ends up blaming himself for everything. But what Kratos doesn't realize is that he loves Atreus more than anything in the world, but is afraid to show that love because of the pain and suffering he's gone through before. And it's that slow withering of his shell that makes for Kratos' character throughout the whole game. This then goes in contrast to the other mothers and fathers of the game. There's Odin, the main bad guy, who gaslights and manipulates all of the people around him to get what he wants, which is to make sure he's the one surviving person after Ragnarok happens. And yet, unlike Kratos, he's also more charismatic, he's more immediately likable, which shows you just how good he is at manipulating people and how parents like these can't actually exist. Then you have characters like Freya, whose son in the last game tried to kill her, only for Kratos to then grab him and snap his neck. And yet, even though Kratos only killed her son to save her life, she's still grief-stricken and seeks revenge against Kratos, something that seems completely weird to Atreus, but to Kratos himself, he completely understands. A mother's unconditional love for her son is something only another parent can understand. All of these things, when contrasted with each other, make Kratos, the protagonist, one of the most compelling characters I have ever seen put to fiction. Kratos made a lot of mistakes in the past, and he made a lot of mistakes in this game too. And yet, by taking the hard route and admitting that he was wrong and telling his son how he really feels, that's how he grows as a person. And that's what makes for some of the most powerful moments in the game, all of which leads to an ending that is so emotionally impactful and fulfilling to not only the story but the character of Kratos that I nearly shed a goddamn tear. In its core, God of War Ragnarok is a story of what it means to be a parent. It's about realizing the mistakes and errors you've made in your life and trying to move past them. More than anything, it's about looking at yourself, looking at others, and swearing to be better no matter what. Well, that's gonna be it for this video. What were your favorite stories of 2022? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're there, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the Lechuga channel for more literature/storytelling based videos. And hey, if you like this video, why not watch another one? I have a playlist on screen right now with all of my book related content. Well, that's gonna be about it. See ya.